Thank you so much for this invitation and this very interesting symposium. And so I would like to engage on the relationship between digital modes of existence and society of control. This is part of the work in progress, and so I won't be able to explain very widely what I mean with the society of control. In order to be very quick in the beginning, just let me point out that I take the notion as well known from two texts from Deleuze. Most of people are wrong believing that this notion of society of control would be something that Deleuze took from Foucault. This is not the case. Foucault was developing in those days biopolitics, and the concept of society of control is more the relationship with the way that Deleuze understands Foucauldian questions to history. And so it's very interesting to understand this society of control as being the problem of a new type of governmentality. And this is why I would like you to consider that the problem of digital has something to do with the jump between industrialization, industrial capitalism, the jump between industrial capitalism to digital capitalism. And in order to explain this, I would like to go back to the relationship between Foucault's theory of enclosure societies and the new digital network. And allow me to be very short. The idea is, to be very simple, the idea is if you are in a society of enclosure, so let's say the 17th, 19th century, you are molded in social devices such as architecture. And for instance, if you're a prisoner, you're imprisoned in a box. And so you'll be one individual in the box. So it is related with the thermodynamic conception of localization and capacity to keep individuals as individuated bodies in boundaries. While the digital way to keep prisoners, as you know, is not to keep them in prisons, because we don't have money enough to build prison in real, but we have them with an electronic device. And so it is the movement, and this is very important for the philosophy of history, it is the movement between a type of society that is regulated through the schematism of individual and masses, and this would be something that implies the industrial society of Marx's theory of liberation, so individual and masses, would be syndicate, union, revolution stuff. And the important point is that with the control society, we do not have anymore the possibility to struggle politically under this type of organization, masses, individual, because we are not taken as individual anymore, as the prisoner examples shows. We are only taken as bank of data that can be censored with the technical and political devices of our society. So it is the move from the archetype of la barrière, the door, to the borne. La borne being, the device that is capable to know that I'm here, okay? And so we are no longer taken on the level of individuated body. And here it is interesting to go back to Simondon, because I believe that in Simondon's book about technicity, there is a distinction that I find very crucial in order to move to a new type of philosophy of history, and this distinction is the distinction between elements, individual and ensemble. And this distinction, I believe, is crucial in order to be capable to make a historical cut between artifact, artisanat, artcraft, artisanat, and industrialization. Let me explain it very shortly. If you take any type of individuated technical object like this, right? And if you take it on the level of individuation, this bubble, you cannot take in consideration all the integrated elements that it has inside, right? So Simondon's theory of individuation in the Individuation book explains to you that in order to understand technical organization, you cannot be only on the level of individuated bodies. You have to consider the trans-individual level of the network. Let's take the example of the hammer. A hammer cannot exist only. A hammer has no function in its own. If you have a hammer, you need to have a nail. If you have a hammer and a nail, you have to have other tools in order to be capable to produce them. So that every type of level of technicity is an ensemble, as Simondon puts it. I would prefer the idea of network, systematic network, because I do understand why Simondon used ensemble, because he wants us to be aware that this is really actualized, institutionalized mode of production. So it does exist, therefore he chose its ensemble, because network would be too idealistic for him. But then I think it would be interesting to take this idea of ensemble together with the idea of elements, so that if you need to explain this, or let's say this would be more interesting example, the split between artcraft and industry is that the production of the elements of the artcraft are no longer on the level of individuated human bodies. But it doesn't mean that it's not human at all. It is human, but it has been mechanized through industry, so that you cannot build a component of a smartphone with your own hands. What you need is to be put in a kind of a mechanological sphere that is probably not only understandable, and this is my point, on the level of organicity, as Bernard Stiegler does. And therefore, this is my third point. You know, in Simondon, there is an interesting distinction between organology, mechanology, and Stiegler chooses organology. And it is not random. He chooses organology because the idea is to maintain the technical surroundings of human beings in a kind of exteriority. Because if you take organology as the point of reference of technicity, you have to believe in a certain point that there is an existence, a body-like existence, that would be possible without any type of technology or techniques. And this is precisely what I do doubt. And so I would like to add to the Stieglerian organology that I believe to be much more influenced by Leroy-Gourhan than by Simondon, because I believe that in Simondon you cannot pose the human body as something, as an individuated soul of the technical life. And so you have to move from Leroy-Gourhan, who takes the technique as being a liberation of the proper body in a phenomenological way, right, to Simondon, and to other thinkers of technicity, for instance, Donna Haraway or Felix Guattari, in order to understand the relationship between organicity and mechanology. And therefore, because we have to pose it in the level of a history, of a philosophy of history, I would like to add the idea of moving from organology and mechanology to what I would call machine ecology, that is, the machine ecology taking in consideration not only the relationship between individual and technicity, but the mode of production of individual through techno-socio-political organization forms, so that we have a possibility to consider the way to react to algorithmic governmentality, not only on the level of individual, which is impossible, but on the level of a meta-stable organization. And in order to do so, I have to, how many time do I have?
Oh, you've got about 15 minutes.
Oh, great. I was very, very quick. And so in order to, in order to do so, I would like to explain that for me, Simondon is part of a new tendency of metaphysics in the 20th century that people do not consider very often, and which leads French philosophy in completely other paths than phenomenology. And this is what I call the theory of multiplicity. If you take, for instance, Bergson, and if you consider Simondon as being in the move of a Bergsonian inquiry on living, on Bergsonian inquiry over living beings, technical beings, and society, you could say that Simondon is pretty much interested with the fact to consider the society as being understandable not only on the level of individuated body, but also on the level of non-individuated body, that is on mode of individuations that are not completely, fully actualized. But in order to do this move, I will need to explain to you how Marx, for one hand, and Lacan, for another hand, were capable to show to us how the production of subjectivity can never be understood on the level of an individual, but has to be understood on the level of collectiveness. And this is something for, in this regard, I find Simondon very helpful because of his concept of trans-individuation. It is exactly the same stuff that I was telling you about when I said that it's impossible to consider a technical individual on the level of its individuated givenness. You have to take the process of individuation both in the direction of its elementary components and on the same level on the dimension of its trans-individual concretization. And it is so impossible to restrain the political level on the level of only one individuated individual. And this is why I believe that the relationship between Simondon and Technique is interesting for us today, but has to be transformed because Simondon, as I said yesterday, remains on the level of the separation between human and technique. And he cannot help it himself because he is doing the job for us. But now that we have read Simondon, it is possible that we take technicity as being something that both on the level of neurological development and sociopolitical forms of embodiment and dominations, that we take this on the level of a transformation of the relationship between what we thought to have been the body and what we thought to have been the mind. And this is why the theory of individuation by Simondon has to be considered as quantic. This allows me to explain to you why I do separate this conception of multiplicity from a phenomenological one, because I believe that a phenomenological point of view remains on the level of the individuated human body, while theory of multiplicity would allow us to understand the metastability of individuation itself. In order to do so, let me shortly, at the end, explain to you why I believe that information, in the sense of Simondon, is really not only a matter of meaning, and therefore I'm not completely okay with Bernard Stiegler's critique, because information, as Simondon would put it, information is not only a matter of meaning, it is also a matter of sense, and this is quite different. And therefore, Simondon is helping us to put together something that is a non-signifying production of sense on the level of, let's say, energetical material level, and the production of signification on the level of a structural differential analysis of cognition. And I think that Simondon is very interesting because he's got, on one hand, one energetic comprehension of singularity and information, But on the other hand, you can pretty much, and this is exactly what Deleuze did, which is something that is really very important in my work. You can understand this energetical comprehension of information as being not only something that resolves into energetical problematics, but who is capable to explain to you the structural way to explain production of sense. So it is very much possible to understand Simondon on the level of a structural analysis, and this is exactly what I'm going to do, trying to drive your attention to a very interesting quote in the introduction of Simondon's Individuation book, when Simondon says that this new theory of individuation is supported by the hypothesis that one information is never relative to one unique and homogeneous reality. And this is the crucial point. So you don't have information as homogeneity. You have it as heterogeneity, and therefore it's a theory of multiplicity in my terms, because it means for Simondon that he understands information, let me quote in French, une information est la signification qui surgira. Information is the signification, meaning or sense. Information is the signification, meaning sense, qui surgira, who will arise after the resolution of the problematic field. And so it is not given as a quantity, it is not either given as a quality, it is given as a metastable disparation. And this concept of disparation is crucial for me because it allows me to understand production of sense as a production that is both a serial, differential concatenation of elements that are non-signifying, and this is something that people who are familiar with Guattari work will understand easily. And it is very interesting to understand the production of meaning and of sense on this level of trans-individuated reality. So that, in order to be clear, in conclusion, it means that the political struggle we endure cannot be resolved only on the level of one individuated individual, and that we have to separate the question of being an individual and being a subjectivity. What Simondon shows us is that there is subjectivity in the social organization, social technical organization, and that this subjectivity is something that is producing human subject. So that this subjectivity and technicity is really what we have to wonder about. And this means that we have to move let's say, a Cartesian conception of ecology that I would call ecolytic, because it remains in a world where you have bodies in a space, in a time, and in space, it's localized, to something that is a quantic reality where you do not have this possibility to locate one body. Or if you do locate the body, you have to understand a body not as something that exists in itself in a space and time, but you have to understand the body as a case of localization. And this is something that I take from Bachelard and from the experience of modern physics, where Bachelard says that now our task for the 20th century and our task for the 21st century is to understand individuation as a case of localization and not as a substantial individual that exists previously to its mode of organization. This is all about it. Thank you for your attention.